Good evening, everybody. Sorry about that. I restarted my computer just to make sure that I wouldn't have a problem tonight. So we'll see. We'll see if that works. But it made me come on a little late because as I was restarting it, well, whatever. I think it worked. It definitely restarted. So hope everybody's doing well. Everybody is getting ready. We're finishing the book of Exodus today. So we're coming to a special night tonight, and I hope everybody's doing good, feeling strong, and letting everybody in. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening. Hi.
So we have again, hopefully people are doing good. How are things in Texas right now?
Much better.
Good. Good to hear.
Much better. And I'm very pleased to say that that our electric bill is reasonable. We're not experiencing what some of those others are with $9,000 bills.
You're lucky.
Very lucky.
It's crazy. And do you know anybody personally who's had those?
No, I don't.
Okay.
No, I thought about calling to find out why we're so lucky. And I said, no, I think I'll just leave well enough alone.
No, I just didn't know if any of your friends or anybody in conversation complained about it to you, or you know, if you actually know anybody, because I have a feeling it's probably not as widespread as some people are saying, but
yes, and I'm thinking it's probably like a certain area of the state.
Yeah. So yeah, I hope it's not as you see what they said, the actual I don't see how many people it says got it, but who got those. I mean, I hear these stories, but I just don't know how many it's actually happening to, these horror stories.
Yes, I think it's anecdotal.
Yeah. So I don't know. It seems like again one of those stories that is not really a story, if you will. But anyways, it's good that things are getting back to normal. It rained out here in Santa Clarita today, pretty bad actually for a while. We actually are right now still under a winter storm warning. It's supposed to maybe rain
overnight. We didn't get a lot of rain up here. We got some, but I think you guys got.
No, we got a bunch over by us. All of a sudden,
Did you get the hail?
No, but it went to. I didn't feel it. I might have run back inside by that point, but it started pounding, like really pounding.
Oh. A lot of rain here, but no hail.
Yeah, I didn't see any hail, but I didn't hear any hail either. But man, all of a sudden, it just was like really, really like I was like, what happened? And yeah, it was weird weather today for us, but you know, definitely felt a little bit like springtime. It's supposed to rain tomorrow and maybe a little bit Friday too. So there you go. But
couple weeks it'll be warm again.
Yeah, well, I would love for it to get green. I like when the hills for those couple months or couple weeks sometimes only get green.
Yeah, especially behind your house.
By there, and in the past, that's kind of what I grew up with in Northridge, and
oh yeah,
always loved those. You know, sheep would come. They were shepherds that we would sometimes.
Where in Northridge did you grow up?
Up in Porter Ranch, at the end of
Porter Ranch. Okay, yeah.
At the old part, the end of Reseda and Tampa.
Okay.
And so
that was a nice area way back then.
It was, and you know, then they infilled it and made even nicer houses, but it was nice. And
it was isolated. There weren't a lot of cars back then.
It was pretty nice. And we used to get sheep on the hills. I remember there was these Basque shepherds that they would bring in that would come in from Spain. They would go up on the mountains with the sheep, and it was like all of a sudden it would seem like we lived out in some country, out in the, I don't know, it didn't seem like California all of a sudden. But I just put us up on Facebook, so we're up there now, and just so you know, we're working hard on Passover. We're going to deliver food to people for Passover. We're hopefully also are going to be working with the senior center. I got to remind them again to get on it. Where if there's homebound seniors who can't afford Passover meals, we're going to make sure everybody gets them this year. So we will have a generous donor that's taking care of Passover meals for people who can't afford them this year. So I'm really excited about that. I hope that again, given the constraints that we're going to have, that we're going to do our best to bring Passover to as many people as possible in our community. And I will tell you, we're not going to deliver meals to Texas, but we would if we could. But we definitely can join us on our virtual Seder. And I will tell you that tonight we're going to have, assuming that we're having an upcoming board meeting to discuss what we're going to do for reopening and start getting things online. But if we kind of go ahead and approve to do so, we're talking about having our first outside event. Well, we did a pet service actually, obviously back in October, but we're talking about maybe doing a dinner outside at Neely's Skillet, which is owned by one of our congregants. The Neil and Haiti Scott own Neely's Skillet. We're talking about doing their next taco night. Well, not their next taco night, but next month they're doing a taco. They do Taco Tuesdays, and they have an outdoor tent, and we would do an event there on maybe April 13th if we go ahead and approve it. So we'll see. I mean, we're working on it, and we're going to have some board meetings and discussions about it. And again, I know a lot of people want us to start doing stuff live in person, and if we can do it safely and we can get everybody's needs met, we'll do that. So we are working on it. I will tell you that. And so again, given the constraints for Passover and what we're going to do, we're going to do our best. And we're working on it. I'm working on some really great new musicians, incorporating them into Passover. I have some really good new Passover songs and videos that we're going to include that in some cases have never been seen before. So good stuff on the horizon. So I promise you that we'll make it as good as we can. We'll do our best. So again, I want to thank everybody for being part of these classes and keeping our community together through the virtual connections. And we're going to take a look tonight at the Torah. And as I mentioned, we're finishing up a book of the Bible tonight. So as we use that as an opportunity to ask and pray for strength for everybody, we're going to take a look at Vayakhel Pekudei. So I'm going to share this up here for everybody to see now. And we are going to look at these last 5 chapters.
Rabbi, are those two parshas always together? Because they really go hand in hand.
Almost always. So we have portions that, they're always split, right? They're always identified separately. But as far as them being read, well, obviously they're split so that they can be read separately. But most of the time, again, unless there's a year where Vayakhel and Pekudei are so there's kind of like portions that we almost always put together, but not always, right? There are some years when we read Vayakhel, Pekudei separately. There's like Bahar Bechukotai. There's several portions which are really close themed. They're also short enough so that they can almost always be put together. And so there's kind of like a priority, like if we need to at this time of year, we use those portions. Some of it has to do with when the holidays fall. And if the holidays fall on the weekends, then obviously we're using special portions, not the weekly Torah portion. The holiday portion then becomes the portion of Saturday of Shabbat. So that changes things. So that has something to do with the calendar. And then obviously that other big issue, which is whether we have that extra month of Adar, whether we have that lunar month compensator. And if we have that, then we essentially have like 4 more weeks that we have to allow for. So for example, this year, we don't have the month of Adar. And so essentially, again, assuming the holidays don't fall on Saturdays, we've got to bunch up 4 portions to make up for those weeks we don't have. So Vayakhel is like number 1 on the list to be a double portion.
Right.
Because again, it really is the same theme as the next one. And again, the 2 portions together are only 5 chapters. So yeah, I don't know what the number is, whether it's, and even some years where we have the extra Adar, we still do Vayakhel and Pekudei together. So it's not even just those years like this year, but some years, even when we have Adar Sheni, we'll do Vayakhel, Pekudei, doubled up. So let's take a look at it. And it actually, again, where we finished up last week with Ki Tisa, which was a massive portion. I mean, really was. It had so much in it. It had a little bit about the tabernacle still and the construction. It kind of starts with that. Then it goes into the the breaking of the 10 commandments, the golden calf story. And then it goes into Moses coming back with the second set of 10 commandments, or the second set of tablets, I would say, now actually officially called the 10 commandments. And the last words we read were that Moses came back with his face radiant or burned, and he wore a veil for the rest of his life. Those were the last words that we read. So Vayakhel, which is the first word of the portion, Vayakhel Moshe, which means he convoked, he brought together or assembled the Israelite community at Kol Adat B'nai Israel. So the word kahal is still used for the word in Hebrew for congregation, for community. So we say Kehillah Kedosha, a holy community. Kuf is the abbreviation for synagogue in Hebrew. It means a holy community. A kahal is one of the words we use for a synagogue. We never use the word synagogue or temple for a long, up until recently. We called it a kehillah or kahal kodesh or kehillah kodesh. And then we also called it Beit Midrash or Beit Knesset, a place of assembly. But a kahal is a community. Wherever they are, they're a community. It also is the root for the word kohelet, which is Ecclesiastes. The book in English or in Greek, Ecclesiastes, it means the one who convokes, the one who assembles people together, the assembler, if you will, the person who assembles not things, but people. And so kohelet also comes from that word kahal. And so the portion begins, and again, it begins at the very beginning of chapter 35. Moses then convoked or assembled, I like that word better, the whole Israelite community, and said to them, these are the things that the Lord has commanded you to do. On 6 days may work be done, but on the 7th day you shall have a Shabbat of complete rest, holy to the Lord. Whoever does any work on it shall be put to death. You shall kindle no fire throughout your settlements on Shabbat, on Sabbath day. So he begins with the Shabbat. Now, what's interesting about this is you have to remember that Moses, when he gets the directions of the Mishkan, of the tabernacle, and of the ark, and of all those holy things that we read about in Tetzaveh and Trumah, he's told that on Mount Sinai. Now, when he comes back down, he kind of tells the people, we're going to get to work. But the way he starts is, we're going to get to work, or even before he says that, we're going to work for 6 days, but on the 7th day, you're not going to work. It's a Shabbat. So before he even talks about what the work is, but we don't do it on Shabbat. And so it shows you how important Shabbat is and was and always will be, that even before he delivers the message of what to do, is the instruction that you have, the meta instruction, the overarching instruction is that everything else I'm going to tell you that we're going to do, we're not doing it on Shabbat. So he actually begins with Shabbat, even though that's not the way God started. God gave the directions, and then in Ki Tisa, in last week's portion, we read the words Vishamru v'nei Yisrael et Shabbat. That in chapter 31 is where God tells Moses, keep the Shabbat. So he starts with that. And here we go. And this is, again, almost Moses's retelling of Truma and Tetzaveh. So God tells Moses in those portions, and then he tells the people in Vayakhel and Pekudei. And here he says, take from among you gifts to the Lord. Everyone whose heart so moves him shall bring them. Gifts for the Lord, gold, silver, and copper. And so again, right like we said at the beginning of Truma, and there's actually the word right here. Truma l'Adonai. And there it is, the gifts to the Lord. And again, from those whose heart moves them. This is not obligation. This is not like a tax. This is a gift that people give based on what they want to do. Nediv libo, whose hearts are moved by this and want to do it. And it starts out with the precious metals. And again, gold, silver, and copper. So in order, and we still have that order of value, whatever people could bring, it was okay. There was things of different economic levels that people could do. And it goes to the other things that they could bring, which were blue, purple, and crimson yarn, fine linen, and goat's hair. And so assumedly, also, again, some type of level of things, and there's a place for all of it. Tanned ram skins. And again, here we have the tachashim, the dolphin skins, and the acacia wood. So those are all materials for putting together the tent, the ark, the big things that, again, the curtains, all the things that are going to kind of like be the main part of it. And then you get into the other things, which are the implements and the essentially what goes inside these vessels. Oil for lighting, spices for the anointing oil, and for the aromatic incense, lapis lazuli, and other stones for setting, for the ephod and for the breastplate. And let all among you who are skilled come and make all that the Lord has commanded. The tabernacle, its tents and its coverings, its clasps, its planks, its bars, its posts, and its sockets, the ark and its poles, the cover and the curtains for the screen, the table and its poles and all its utensils, and the bread of display, the lampstand for lighting, its furnishings and its lamps, and the oil for lighting, the altar of incense and its poles, the anointing oil and the aromatic incense, and the entrance screen for the entrance of the tabernacle. So again, all of these things that people are going to do, it says right here, let all among you who are skilled. So it actually is an open invitation for people to help come along. Now we know, because God told Moses that I'm going to send Bezalel to help you. He's going to be the master craftsman. He's going to be the one who's going to guide everything. And I'm going to give him the knowledge of what to do. I'm going to literally put it in his mind. He's going to be able to put it together. And I'm also going to send Aholiab to be his assistant. But here, Moses says there's going to be a lot of work for people to do. And so it also includes the altar of burnt offering, its copper grating, its poles and all its furnishings, the laver and its stand, the hangings of the enclosures, its posts and the sockets, the screens for the court, gate of the court, the pegs for the tabernacle, the pegs for the enclosure and the cords, the service vestments for officiating in the sanctuary, the sacral vestments of Aaron the priest, and the vestments of his sons for priestly service. So the whole country, the whole community of the Israelites left Moses' presence. And so when Moses gives the list of everything that he just got, he'd gotten it in Mount Sinai, and he got it in the portions Truma and Tetzaveh. When he gives it in the list that we have in Vayakhel, you realize it's quite a lot of things. It's we didn't see it because when God first gave the instructions, God gives the instructions and says, and this is the way you make the Mishkan, and this is the way you make the ark. And then there's space in between it. And so you don't realize, and because it really goes over two portions, you don't realize, oh man, there's so many different things that are going into this sacred space. And so the people have just been laid on with this tremendous building project that's really being put onto them to come up with the items to do the building. And again, as we recall, we just had the golden calf. The golden calf incident is actually there to instruct us. Look what happens if people don't have direction. if they don't have a project to work on, they end up creating the golden calf. And what's so special about this is that we're going to get people involved together on a project that they're going to work on. So let's take a look. Any questions or comments so far? Anybody? Okay. So here's what it
It's
says.
beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everyone who excelled in ability, everyone whose spirit moved him came, bringing to the Lord his offering for the work of the Lord, the work of the tent of meeting, and for all its service, and for all the sacral vestments. And this is really pretty. Men and women, all whose hearts moved them, all who would make an elevation offering of gold to the Lord, came bringing brooches, earrings, rings, and pendants, gold objects of all kinds. Everyone who had in his possession blue, purple, and crimson yarn, fine linen, goat's hair, tan ram skins, and dolphin skins brought them. Everyone who would make gifts of silver or copper brought them as gifts for the Lord. And everyone who had in his possession acacia wood for any work of the service brought that. And all the skilled women spun with their own hands and brought what they had spun in blue, purple, and crimson yarns and in fine linen. And all the women who excelled in that skill spun the goat's hair. And the chieftains brought lapis lazuli and other stones for setting, for the ephod and for the breastpiece, and spices and oil for lighting, and for the anointing oil, and for the aromatic. Oh, somebody was frozen again. For the aromatic incense. And this is the great part here. Thus the Israelites, all the men and women whose hearts moved them to bring anything for the work that the Lord through Moses had commanded to be done, brought it as a free will offering to the Lord. And Moses said to the Israelites, see, the Lord has singled out by name Bezalel, son of Uri, son of Hur, of the tribe of Judah. He has endowed him with a divine spirit of skill, ability, and knowledge in every kind of craft, and has inspired him to make designs for work in gold, silver, and copper, to cut stones for setting, and to carve wood, to work in every kind of designer's craft. So again, it's not usual for somebody to have knowledge of all of these kinds of skills. Usually one person knows how to carve wood, somebody knows how to do jewelry, he knows how to do all of it. He's been given this gift to do all this type of handiwork. And to give his directions, he and Aholiab, son of Achisamach of the tribe of Dan, have been endowed with the skill to do any work of the carver, the designer, the embroiderer in blue and purple and crimson yarns and in fine linen, and of the weaver as workers in all crafts and as makers of designs. And then it continues. Let then Bezalel and Oholiab and all the skilled persons whom the Lord has endowed with skill and ability to perform expertly all the tasks connected with the service of the sanctuary, carry out all the Lord has commanded. So gets everybody together. The people are starting to work. Men and women are working together. And Bezalel and Aholiab, and again, other people who have these skills, are now being directed and working together. And Moses has kind of, again, delegated this work to the craftspeople. And again, it seems like to anybody who knew how to work with these kinds of things, including, again, men and women. Moses then called Bezalel and Aholiab and every skilled person whom the Lord had endowed with skill, everyone who excelled in ability, to undertake the task and carry it out. And here's the part that I love. They took over from Moses all the gifts that the Israelites had brought to carry out the tasks connected with the service of the sanctuary. But when these continued to bring free will offerings to him morning after morning, all the artisans who were engaged in the task of the sanctuary came, each from the task upon which he was engaged, and said to Moses that people are bringing more than is needed for the tasks entailed in the work that the Lord has commanded us to be done. They've brought too much. We don't need this much. Moses thereupon had this proclamation made throughout the camp: let no man or woman make further effort toward gifts for the sanctuary. And so this people stopped bringing. So what was so amazing about this project was that they literally brought too much. I mean, how often does that happen, where people start a campaign and they get too much. They get more than they even needed. And so people were more than happy and more than excited to bring stuff to the sanctuary. So what a wonderful thing that if you get everyone to collaborate and everyone's working together, but also everybody wanted to make sure that it got finished. Everybody wanted to make sure that there was enough. And they actually had to tell people, stop, it's too much. You brought too much. And so what's so nice is that right after we have this horrible story of the golden calf, and we see this very low point for the people, we now have this story, which is the complete opposite, which is that people, when they're given this direction, really rise to the occasion. And it's really heartwarming because much of what the people do in the desert, in the wilderness, is really bad. But yet here's an example of the people really, really rising to the challenge and being the best of the best, version of themselves. So again, very clear that it's men and women, that men and women are working together on this, that it's important for both of them to be there. There's actually we're going to get to it in a second. There's an interesting teaching coming up. We'll go up a little further. So their efforts had been more than enough for all the tasks to be done. Then all the skilled among those engaged in the work made the tabernacle of 10 strips of cloth, which they made of fine twisted linen, blue, purple, and crimson yarns. Into these they worked the design of the kruvim. So we talked about the kruvim, the angels that are on top of the ark. They're also in the pattern of the Mishkan itself, of the tent on the outside, that again was the outer walls, essentially the tent walls of the tabernacle also had kruvim in them. And it was worked into the design. It was and so it must have been quite beautiful, and you can see quite big. The length of each cloth was 28 cubits. So again, that's like 40 feet. And the width of each cloth, so that's 42 feet high. And the width of each cloth was 4 cubits, all cloths having the same measurement. So it's about 6 feet by 40. It's a long strip of which is why they translated it as strips, because it's a very long strip of cloth. They joined 5 of the cloths to one another, and they joined the 5 other cloths to one another. And again, we had the description of this in Truma and Tetzaveh. Now in Vayakhel and Pekudei, we're going to see them do what they were commanded to do. So what they were commanded to do, they're doing it here. So that's the commandment, and this is the fulfillment of the commandment. They made loops of blue wool on the edge of the outermost cloth of the one set, and did the same on the edge of the outermost cloth of the other set. They made 50 loops on the one cloth, and they made 50 loops on the edge of the end of the other set, the loops being opposite one another. And they made 50 gold clasps and coupled the units to one another with the clasps so that the tabernacle became one whole. So again, the cloths, that these strips of cloth have on their end clasps. They have like round hooks, and those hooks or again, those poles that the cloths were on, they were spaced out so that again they wouldn't be too far apart. They wouldn't be there was quite a lot of clasp on there, which again was a lot of precious metal, a lot of gold on each strip of cloth. So these are it's quite an amazing piece of cloth, beautiful fabric, but also gold on it as well. and it says, they made the cloths of goat's hair for a tent cover for the tabernacle. They made the cloths 11 in number. So we actually looked at a picture. I can show it again, that there was a covering over the tabernacle that was like a goat's hair tent that went over the tabernacle itself, which sounds a lot like something that would have kept the elements off of it, so that it was kind of like an outer cover for the tabernacle. So just like people put a cover over their cars, well, that's what went over the Mishkan, because it was out in the wilderness. And so this outer cover would have kept it from, being damaged by the wind and the rain, etc. But of course, what's interesting about it is that it means that if you looked at it from the outside, it wouldn't look so nice, because it had this cover of goat hair over this beautiful gold and beautiful fabrics. So it's kind of weird that you wouldn't have seen it from the outside, but you would have seen it from the inside. So inside the tabernacle, you would have seen the cloth, and it would have been impressive, but you wouldn't have seen it on the outside. You would have seen the goat's hair cover. So that's kind of weird. The length of each cloth was 30 cubits, which again is like 45 feet, and the width of each cloth was 4 cubits, the 11 cloths having the same measurement. They joined 5 of the cloths by themselves and the other 6 cloths by themselves. They made 50 loops on the edge of the outermost cloth of the one set, and they made 50 loops on the edge of the end cloth on the other set. They made 50 copper clasps to couple the tent together so that it might become one whole. So again, on the outer tent covering, they didn't use gold, they used copper, which kind of makes sense. It's not as expensive.
Everything you're doing.
It doesn't make sense to have precious metals on that. So that is a pretty cool description of the tents. Oh, but we're not done yet, because they also made a covering of 10 ram skins for the tent and a covering of dolphin skins above. And they made planks of the tabernacle for acacia wood upright. So again, this is inside the tabernacle. Sorry, they had also a covering above the nice part of it. It's underneath the ram skins they had, or underneath the goat skins, they had this ram skin, which the covering of the tent also wasn't fabric, it was skins. They made the planks of the tabernacle of acacia wood upright. The length of each plank was 10 cubits, and the width of each plank a cubit and a half. So, as we said before, these are also fairly narrow strips of wood. Each plank had 2 tenons parallel to each other, and they did that the same with all the planks of the tabernacle. And again, the tenons are the wood holes and pieces that would kind of would snap together. It's kind of a way to be done without nails, without nailing it each time, that the tenons actually line up. Of the planks of the tabernacle, they made 20 planks on the south side, making 40 silver sockets under the 20 planks, 2 sockets under one plank for its 2 tenons, and 2 sockets under each following plank for its 2 tenons. And for the other side of the tabernacle, the north side, 20 planks. With their 40 silver sockets, 2 sockets under one plank and 2 sockets under each of the following plank. And for the rear of the tabernacle to the west, they made 6 planks, and they made 2 planks for the corners of the tabernacle to the rear. They matched at the bottom, but terminated as one at the top into one ring. So they did with both at the 2 corners. And again, what they're talking about here are the way the corners would line up of each of the corners of the tabernacle. Thus, there were 8 planks with their sockets of silver, 16 sockets, 2 under each plank. And you can see they're using silver for the plank, for the sockets. Here they're using silver sockets, and I think it was all silver in, they were all silver for the sockets for this. Hold on one second. Okay. They made bars of acacia wood, 5 for the planks of the one side of the wall of the tabernacle, 5 bars up for the planks on the other side of the wall of the tabernacle, and 5 bars for the planks of the wall of the tabernacle to the rear, to the west. And they made the center bar to the run halfway up the planks from end to end. And I'll show you this one more time. We showed this before, and now as you see it described, we'll show you one more picture of the tabernacle, the tenons of, and how these pieces went together. Let me show you right here, and to kind of understand how the bars went together. So, hold on one second. So this is, one second. I just want to show you the tenons first. And that took me to a site where it has a whole lot of other stuff. Nope, it's actually a Chabad's description of, well, I'll show you the picture that I have here. So this is what we're talking about with tenons. So the holes on the holes allow for the wood to slip into it, so that again, without using hammer and nails, they lock together like joints. And this allows for, it to be taken up, taken down, and not for you to have to keep putting holes in nails, nail it together and again keep puncturing the wood. So this is really makes sense from the standpoint of portability and being able to use being able to use that. And to give you an idea again of what we're talking about, so this kind of gives you the idea of what the framework of the Mishkan itself looked like. Again, this is the outer tent. This is the outer tent, but the inner tent, the actual Mishkan, the tabernacle, had in it these boards, and it's hard to see the boards because there's strips in here, but those are the ones, the acacia wood planks that we're reading about. And this is opened up so you can see it on the other side, but you can see that so these walls are not what we're talking about. This is the outer walls. It's not that. This is what we're talking about.
And they carried all that through the desert.
Yep.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And the description of it really does make sense from a description of like, they seem to either know that this existed or again had this.
And none of it was ever found archaeologically.
Nope.
Not one scrap of this says it was
I would say none of it was. Yeah, I mean, none of it was, because it was all, even by the time of the Romans, it would have been destroyed 500 years earlier.
Right.
So this is the outer goats, the goat's hair outer tent, and then that was kind of like the protecting tent.
Yeah.
And this would be the tent inside. The walls here on the outside, which you can't see, those would have had the tabernacles. Those would have had the kruvim on it. And again, I haven't found a really good depiction of it, but again, people usually focus on the gold covered planks. And again, one of the important things you can see is that there was a rod. There was a rod that went on the sides. That is this part that they're talking about, the center bar that goes along the planks from end to end. So this would be the way that it's kind of held together and was solid on the side, but it also is solid in the fact that at the top and bottom there's tenons that the things are stuck into, and that also keeps them locked together as well. So it was, it was a feat of engineering because, again, it's not just it. And again, it's not ridiculously big. I mean, if you see if you look at the dimensions, again, we're talking about 45 feet long this way and then 15 feet up and down. So again, when we're talking about 30 cubits, that's what we're talking about, 45 feet. So it's not ridiculously big, but again, it was heavy. It was a lot to carry as far as, once it's covered in gold, and the fact that it does have to be brought down and set up again. Now, if we look at how many times the Israelites actually moved during how many stations they had in the wilderness, it wasn't taken down like every week. I want to make it clear that the 40 years in the wilderness, much of that time, they were not. Well, first of all, they've already marched to Mount Sinai, so they haven't had to. So the first time it's set up is here at Mount Sinai, actually, but they've already marched, a few weeks from there. They were actually where they needed to be, crossing right on the other side of the Jordan River. They were there within a month and a half or so. I mean, it wasn't long for them to get to where they needed to be. So it wasn't like they had that far to go, and they didn't move around that much in the last 38 years of their journey. It was a little bit, and they were not completely in the same place. They didn't move that much, and they actually probably didn't take it down. It wasn't like they took it down every month for a long time. There definitely were times when they were taking it down, up and down a lot. But then when they finally got to kind of the area around Kadesh, which is where they're kind of stationed for most of the next 38 years, they don't take it up and down that many times, at least according to numbers. It's a little difficult to know for sure, but it could be that they really didn't take it up and down that much once they kind of came to the area where they were supposed to be. We normally say, well, they're wandering the desert for 40 years. They're not wandering the desert for 40 years. They actually get to where they're supposed to go. Remember, they send in the spies in Numbers, in Shlach Lecha. They send in the spies. They're where they're supposed to be. They're close enough there to send in spies, right? So they're only a couple days outside of the promised land when they send in the spies. So they're not that far away when they're told you're not coming in. So it's not like they wandered around for 40 years to get, or they were lost, or they were, it took them a long time to get there. It didn't take them a long time to get there. They just weren't allowed to come in. And that's why people have to kind of rethink about, what they've been thinking for most of their lives about the Israelite journey. It was not a journey of 40 years. It was a journey of about a year. And then it was a really stinking, horrible knowledge that for the next 38 years, you don't get to come in. And you can look at it and you can see how close you were, which is, to me, an even a bigger trauma than, and again, a reminder of how you screwed up, because you did get there. You could have been there. You could have been there for the last 38 years, for a whole generation. So I do want to point out, it didn't necessarily get taken up and down. According to at least the book of Numbers, it's about 30 something times that it's taken, there's different stations. I'll tell you exactly how many stations there were, but there weren't that many stations.
And even to take this whole thing down and put it up 30 times is a lot.
Yeah, but I do want to make I do want to make clear that it wasn't like every day. They had to take it down. It's actually according to Numbers chapter 33, it's 42 locations. So essentially they took it down 42 times over 40 years, which means, again, I don't want to make it like it was one time a year they did it, because actually it was probably 30 times one year and then 12 times the next 30 years. So for a lot of the time, it was probably actually, it probably was, let's put it this way, from where they were at when they sent in the spies, they would have gone, I'm looking at it right now, they would have gone, for the last 40 years. I've never really thought about it this way, but about 10 spots. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9 spots. The last point from Kadesh, which is where Miriam died and where they were told, you're not going to move. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Technically 8.
Did they ever build it in Israel itself? Did they go take it across the Jordan River?
Yeah, they did. And there are descriptions of it in the book of Samuel that they did have different places that they took it to in Israel. So that it was in Shiloh for a long time. And it was in a couple other places while it was in the land of Israel before King David. So that it did travel inside, it did travel around Israel. Did it travel a lot? Probably not. It probably was in certain places for 10, 15, 20 years at a time, at least according to the Bible, maybe even 40 or 50 years in one place. But yeah, it did travel. And it's a good point. It did travel around until, again, according to kind of what we think, what it kind of says really is that the tabernacle either found a final home inside the Beit HaMikdash, inside Solomon's temple, or it was symbolically represented inside Solomon's temple.
Got it.
But yeah, I mean, this is built most importantly to be collapsible, and but at the same time, it needs to be very sturdy while people are inside it, and creating that beautiful sacred space. So that was, again, a good reminder of what we're talking about and how it's used. But we'll get back to the details, the beautiful details of it. They overlaid the planks with gold and made their rings of gold as holders for the bars, and they overlaid the bars of gold. Again, this is the outside. This is the outer holder, the center bar. So that was made with gold. They made the curtain of blue, purple, and crimson yarn and fine twisted linen, working it into the design of the kruvim. We said they made its 4 posts of acacia wood and overlaid them with gold, with their hooks of gold, and they cast them with 4 silver sockets. They made the screen for the entrance of the tent of blue, purple, and crimson yarn and fine twisted linen done in embroidery, and 5 posts for it with their hooks. They overlaid their tops and their bands with gold. But the 5 sockets were of silver, so again, of copper. Sorry. So some of the hooks are made out of gold, some are made out of silver, and then some again are made out of copper. My guess is, again, the ones that are, the reason for it is to some extent the ones you wouldn't see as much would have been made out of copper. But again, silver is a very good metal to work with as far as sturdiness. It's a little bit sturdier in some ways, probably the way they used it, than gold, and the gold is much more malleable. And so be interesting to, again, think about how much metal, the precious metals that they were using for this. Again, gold, silver, and copper are all being used for hooks, mostly for hooks. Most of the gold is used for covering things, and especially, again, those planks of wood. They weren't, nothing's really done in silver. It's either gold or copper, which I guess kind of makes sense because the bowls and some of those things. Actually, there are some smaller things, again, that are made in silver, but I'm talking about the really big things. I can't really think of anything that was big that was made out of silver. Most of the bigger things are gold, the big wood pieces and the ark, and those things were all gold, obviously. And then some things we're going to see are made out of copper. And of course, wood or stone. But Solomon made the ark of acacia wood, 2.5 cubits long and 1.5 cubits wide and 1.5 cubits high. And again, this is the Ark of the Covenant. He overlaid it with pure gold inside and out, and he made a gold molding for it round about. He cast 4 rings of gold for it, for its 4 feet, 2 rings on each of its side walls and 2 rings on the other. He made poles of acacia wood, overlaid them with gold, and inserted the poles into the rings on the side walls of the ark for carrying the ark. He made a cover of pure gold, 2.5 cubits long and 1.5 cubits wide. He made 2 kruvim of gold. He made them of hammered work at the 2 ends of the cover. One cherub at one of the kruvim at one end, and the other cherub on the other end. He made the cherubim of one piece with the cover at its 2 ends. And again, we said the 2 kruvim facing each other, the angels with their wings facing each other. And again, these are not, that's why I don't even like to use the word cherub, especially I don't like the cherubim are, I can say without laughing, but when you think of a cherub, you're thinking of like a little baby-faced angel, and that is not what it, and that's what, if you look up the word cherubic in, in English, the word cherubic is like, actually, I'll read you what the definition is. The definition, it says, having the childlike innocence or plump prettiness of a cherub, a round cherubic face. Well, that's not what Kruvim are. Kruvim are actually fairly scary angels that are not round, innocent, plump, childlike.
Guardians, are they not?
Yeah, Cupid-like angels, because that's what we think of when we think of a cherub in English. That's not what the Kruvim are. So that's why it's hard for me to use the word cherub, because it's not what the word in English means at all. So if you looked at the difference between what the Kruvim look like in Hebrew and what they look like in English, no, it's not. It's not the. Actually, let me see if somebody, somebody of course did this. So well, I don't know if this is necessarily the best image, but somebody was making a point about the angels and what they would look like. So somebody did look, the definition technically would have been somebody here. I'll show you this. Here, I'm going to share it right now. This is what one artist did, and we kind of made how silly the difference is. So in some places, the Kruvim are described as having different faces. So these different faces as one description of the cherub. Definitely the wings are there. The question of like what face it had, again, in Ezekiel's vision, the Kruvim have these different faces: face of a bull, face of an eagle, face of a lion, a face of a human. Those are the faces that he describes. And that's one source. That's Ezekiel's source. I don't know if the Kruvim on the top of the ark had 4 faces. Most of the time, they're not depicted that way. But again, the difference between that and that it's pretty significant. And again, even if doesn't look all like that, it definitely doesn't look like that. And so I think the point is that, the English has a connotation that we just don't have in Hebrew. So that's why I kind of laugh when I say it. And that's why I usually go to the Hebrew word, the Kruvim, which literally means these are the angels who are close to God. The Kruvim had their wings spread out above, shielding the cover with their wings. They faced each other, and the faces of the Kruvim were turned toward the cover. And again, did they have more than one face? Could be, but we don't know for sure because there are 2 of them. And so when it says Panai, again, it is faces, but it could be describing the 2 faces of the 2 angels, not the multi faces of each of the Kruvim. So it says he made the table, and this is again the table, the shulchan, which is inside the tabernacle where they would put the items, the holy items. He made the table of acacia wood, 2 cubits long, 1 cubit wide, and 1.5 cubits high. He overlaid it with pure gold and made a gold molding around it. He made a rim of a hand's breadth around it and made a gold molding for its rim about. He cast 4 gold rings for it and attached the 4 rings to the 4 corners at its legs. The rings were next to the rim as holders for the poles to carry the table. So just like the ark has poles and rings, so does the shulchan, so does the table. He made the poles of acacia wood for carrying the table and overlaid them with gold. And it says the utensils that were to be upon the table, its bowls, ladles, jugs, and jars with which to offer libations, he made them of pure gold. He made the lampstand of pure gold. And again, we have a description of the menorah that we read already. He made the lampstand, its base, and its shaft of hammered work. Its cups, its calyxes, and its petals were of one piece with it. So again, this is quite amazing that it's hammered out of one piece. It's not different pieces. It actually is supposed to be of one piece. 6 branches issued from its sides, 3 branches from one side of the lampstand and 3 branches of the other on the side of the lampstand. So again, 7 branches, because the middle one and then the 3 on each side. There were 3 cups shaped like almond blossom, each with a calyx and petals on one branch. And there were 3 cups shaped like almond blossoms, each with calyx and petals on the next branch. So for all 6 branches issuing from the lampstand. So there are calyxes and petals on each one of the and each one of the lamps, in each of the pieces, each one of the lights. And it says on the lampstand itself, there were 4 cups shaped like almond blossoms, each with calyx and petals. A calyx of one piece with it under a pair of branches, and a calyx of one piece with it under the second pair of branches, and a calyx of one piece with it under the last pair of branches, for all 6 branches issuing from it. Their calyxes and their stems were of one piece with it, the whole of it a single hammered piece of pure gold. And as we've talked about before, this menorah, this is not the menorah we use for Hanukkah, which has, of course, 9 candles. This one was 1 for each day. And as we've looked at it before, this menorah is still the symbol of the nation of Israel. And so Israel has as its symbol, and again, as the, kind of the national symbol, the emblem of Israel, is that menorah. So this is our symbol of Israel. And you can still see it, right? So this is what it looks like. That's the symbol of Israel, which has, again, it is the menorah. And you can see that the calyxes are represented here. You can even see them in the menorah. And again, people who try to make this will show the different pieces and the different calyxes to show you that, again, these are the description according to what it says. This is what it looks like. And again, this is the menorah that's out in front of the Knesset, which is a artistic version of the menorah. It's not it doesn't have the calyxes, the almond branches. It actually has different symbols of different times in Jewish history on the menorah. And this is the one out in front of the Knesset. But it's again, it's an artistic version of the menorah, which again would have looked more like one single piece of gold, with the calyxes and the almond pattern, the branches. And so it was supposed to look like, if you think about it, it was supposed to look like a tree of life. It was supposed to have that kind of motif to it, which was to have a tree of life. I'm trying to find another really good version of the menorah. Of course, this is the Romans depicted the menorah when they captured Jerusalem. This is not the first menorah that is described here. It's the later menorah that was done during the Second Temple period. But you can see the Second Temple period menorah from 2,000 years ago did have calyxes and was made like the original one. Obviously, the Jews of that period wanted to have their menorah look like the original one. Look, that's the Roman description of it. That's not, we didn't do that. The Roman, that's on the Arch of Titus. So that's what the Romans said it looked like when they brought it into Rome. We didn't make this up. I mean, this is what they showed. So they had it. We don't know where it is now. We have no idea where that menorah is, but according to the Romans, they brought it to Rome. Again, it's not this one, but it's based on this one, and it's still 2,000 years old, and it was in what we call, again, the Second Temple, the temple that was destroyed by the Romans, that they took it. So where did it go?
Vatican?
Well, that's one theory, is that it's in the Vatican. It's in the Vatican archives. There's another theory that it was destroyed years ago when Rome was sacked by the Vandals, by barbarians that destroyed Rome. They would have gotten to it. I don't know. I mean, to me, the idea that that it was still around 400 years after that they took it. Now, again, it could be that the Romans just melted it down whenever they wanted to. We don't know.
Mhm.
We don't know because the Romans don't talk about what happened to it. So people try to speculate, well, what if, how could it? So the Vandals taking it, and again, the Vandals have become synonymous with with vandalism.
Right.
They were like any other barbarian group that conquered, Rome or conquered other places and took away treasures. So we know that Vikings or whatever tribes did that, but we really don't know. We don't, I mean, that's speculation. We know the Vandals sacked Rome. We don't know that the menorah was there in 450 or whenever it was when they did it. So to say that they did it, there's no evidence that they did it. I would say the better evidence is that it's still somewhere in the Vatican, but we don't know that for sure. And we've never gotten confirmation one way or the other. I will tell you, and again, you can't make this as an argument, so I'm not saying that this is an argument. The Vatican has never denied it. They have it. The Vatican's never come out and said, we don't have the menorah. So again, it doesn't mean that they have it.
No.
But they've never said they don't have it. And they could have said, they could have said that they don't have it. So look, I don't know what to tell you other than it is a mystery of one of those histories, we do know that the Romans had it. That's all I can tell you. And we know that the Romans took it. They say that they took it. And again, I've never heard the Vatican say that they have I'm just going to see if they've ever denied it. Let me just see if they've ever said that they deny it. Okay, no, doesn't say they ever denied it. Okay, so let's continue. So it says on the lampstand itself, there were 4 cups shaped like almond blossoms, each with a calyx and petals. Calyx of one piece with it under a pair of branches, and a calyx of one piece with it under the second pair of branches, and a calyx of one piece with it under the last pair of branches. So all 6 branches issuing from it, their calyxes and their stems were one piece with it, the whole of it a single hammered piece of pure gold. He made it 7 lamps, its tongs and its fire pans of pure gold. He made it all and its furnishings out of a talent of pure gold, which is a tremendous weight of gold. I mean, you're talking about hundreds of pounds of gold. He made the incense altar of acacia wood, a cubit long and a cubit wide, square and 2 cubits high. Its horns were of one piece with it. He overlaid it with pure gold. So again, if you're going to light incense on a piece of wood, it's going to melt, it's going to burn, it's going to catch fire. It's not good. But if you cover it with pure gold, then you can use it. You can use it and it will be beautiful and it will not melt. Oh, well, it could melt, I guess you can make the argument, but it's not going to burn. Its tops, its sides, round about, and its horns. And he made a gold molding for it round about. He made 2 gold rings for it under its molding on its 2 walls, on opposite sides, as holders for the poles with which to carry it. He made the poles of acacia wood and overlaid them with gold. He prepared the sacred anointing oil and the pure aromatic incense, expertly blended. And again, the fact that it's expertly blended and pure aromatic, again, as we said, this incense, we don't mess around with it because we don't know how to expertly blend it. And because we don't want to mess it up, we don't do it. And so this is the anointing oil and the pure aromatic incense. Again, both are combinations of oils and different spices. He made the altar for burnt offering of acacia wood, 5 cubits long and 5 cubits wide. And by the way, this oil, this sacred oil for anointing and for using to light the menorah and all those kinds of things, that's why when we talk about Hanukkah, about how they had to get the oil for the menorah, because they had to blend it, they had to make it, they had to allow it to settle and purify it, which they couldn't do right away. And because they were very serious about how they made it, they couldn't rush it. And so that's why when you hear those stories about, well, why would it take 8 days to make oil? Because they didn't have any pure oil and they didn't mess around with what they used. They were very, very careful about it. And so would not ever make it, hastily or without a proper process. He made the altar for burnt offering of acacia wood, 5 cubits long and 5 cubits wide, square, 3 cubits high. He made horns for it on its 4 corners, the horns being of one piece with it, and he overlaid it with copper. So again, this is the altar for burnt offerings. It's different than the incense. This is going to have meat on it. And so this one is actually going to be made out of copper. He made all the utensils of the altar, the pails, the scrapers, the basins, the flesh hooks, and the fire pans. He made all those out of copper. He made for the altar a grating of meshwork in copper, extending below under its ledge and its middle. So this again has a grating, a meshwork grating on it. He cast 4 rings at the 4 corners of the copper grating as holders for the poles. And he made the poles of acacia wood and overlaid them with copper. So again, poles and rings for carrying it in the metal that it was designed from. And he inserted the poles into the rings on the side walls of the altar to carry it by them. He made it hollow of boards. Now here's an interesting thing. He made the laver of copper and its stand of copper from the mirrors of the women who performed the tasks at the entrance of the tent of meeting. So the laver is the bowl, right? It's the copper bowl with water, which they would use for washing hands and feet, by the way, when they would come into the temple precinct, and of course here at the Mishkan at the tabernacle. So the temple and the tabernacle had a laver, a big copper laver. So let's explain what just happened, because the rabbis commenting on this throughout the generations, in every generation from the Talmud all the way to modern era, notice that this is a very weird thing. So yeah, again, this is copper. It's mainly copper and gold, as I said. The silver doesn't seem to be used as much as the gold and copper. But here's the interesting thing. It says specifically that the laver was made from the mirrors of the women. So people say, why does it say that specifically? Why is that detail here in the Torah? Now, it doesn't say where the copper or the gold came from the other stuff. I mean, you'd think, if you're going to tell it to us here, why don't you tell it to us everywhere? And so what's interesting here is that here for the washing that the people are doing, the women's mirrors were melted down for it. So the women used mirrors that were made out of copper. So they shined up the copper, and that was what they looked at themselves in reflections. And so because of that, the rabbi said, that seems weird that people were encouraged to use things that were like, you can't get more vain than that, right? Using mirrors for something holy, you'd think would kind of go against logic, right? That this is a vanity thing, right? And women being vain is like not holy, right? It's the opposite of holy. It's women just being vain. And the rabbis noticed that there's a reason for this. There must be a reason for it. This isn't an accident. It's pointed out for a reason. And so they had a very interesting take on it, which is that women beautifying themselves for their husbands is not stupid. It's not vain. It's not maybe always vain, because they said these are women, remember, who were married to men who were slaves, right? And so the lives of the men, and assumedly the women too, but the men who were out, it says specifically the men are out doing back-breaking work and humiliating work for the Egyptians. They had women that were still making themselves beautiful for them. And the rabbis taught a really important lesson from that, which is what the women had done by doing that, by beautifying themselves for their husbands who were working in humiliating jobs, was that they made them feel special. And what could be more holy than keeping hope alive for the men who were being humiliated on a daily basis? So when they came home, they still had women who were beautifying themselves for them. A really interesting take on it. It's not one that you would necessarily see as the lesson from this, but and again, I don't want to say, like, I don't know, it offends anybody's sensibilities that men and women had different roles to play, but this idea that it specifically says that these were women's mirrors. Rabbis pointed out that, look, this was really a recognition of the fact that having an intimate relationship with somebody, especially somebody who's being humiliated on a daily basis by their slave masters, actually is something very holy and very special and really deserve to be recognized.
And the mirrors were a high value to the women, and I would think to the men. Therefore, giving them to the Lord was a high value to honor the Lord.
Yeah. And I just love that midrash, that explanation, because what it does is it takes something that, like, look, it definitely is unusual. The language here is unusual because it doesn't just say mirrors. It says mirrors of the women.
Mm-hmm.
And so it really tells us that, no, the women were really doing something very important by beautifying themselves and making their husbands feel special. So it is, again, perhaps it's an antiquated midrash and it doesn't make sense anymore for people. But I think it's a very nice midrash and one that kind of gives us an answer of something that you may not expect, which is that Judaism doesn't say that beautification or making yourself beautiful is stupid. It's not, especially, again, when we consider that for some people, again, for people who maybe have a dismal life, which a slave has a pretty dismal life, having a partner to come home to gives them hope and maybe kept them alive more than anything else during those years of slavery. So it's kind of an interesting little teaching and one that is appropriate as we get ready for Passover to think about. How did people survive in slavery? How did they make it through their daily horrific life of having their freedoms taken away from them and not being able to work the way they wanted to work, do the things that they wanted to do, but to have to answer to a slave master? Well, maybe their lives with their partners ended up keeping them going. So a nice midrash, a nice thing to think about before Passover when we think about what it was to be slaves, which we're supposed to do. So maybe not politically correct, but I don't mind. I don't mind sharing that, and I don't mind. You can interpret it if you want, you can reverse it if you want. I don't care. I just want you to know that our ancestors understood the importance of making sure that people have pleasure, that they have intimacy, and that that's a good thing. It's not something that we frown upon or minimize even. It's holy. So he made the enclosure, and on the south side, 100 cubits of hangings of fine twisted linen for the enclosure, with their 20 posts and their 20 sockets of copper, the hooks and the bands of the posts being silver. So these are silver. So here's a little bit more silver. I knew there was some more silver coming up. On the north side, 100 cubits with their 20 posts and their 20 sockets of copper, the hooks of bands of the posts being silver. And again, this is the enclosure. This is the outer area.
Mm-hmm.
On the west side, so on the north side, 100 cubits with 20 posts and 20 sockets. On the west side, 50 cubits of hangings with their 10 posts and their 10 sockets, their hooks and their bands of their posts being silver. And on the front side to the east, 50 cubits. So you have on the north and south sides, you have 100 cubits of hangings. And then on the two other sides, the west and east sides, you have 50 cubits. So it's a rectangle. It's a rectangle. And on the east, the front side to the east, 50 cubits, 15 cubits of hangings on one flank and with their 3 posts and their 3 sockets. And 15 cubits of hangings on the other flank on each side of the gate of the enclosure with their 3 posts and their 3 sockets. So again, this is the opening. So on the east side, the people would come in through the east. All the hangings around the enclosure were of fine twisted linen. The sockets for the posts were of copper. The hooks and the bands of the posts were of silver. The overlay of the tops was silver, and all the posts of the enclosure were banded with silver. So for that outer tent, outer enclosure, that was where you saw more silver, and you also saw linen. The actual curtains or the fabric was linen. The sockets for the posts were of copper. Again, the hooks, the bands of posts were silver. The overlay of the tops was silver. All the posts of the enclosure were banded with silver. The screen of the gate of the enclosure, done in embroidery, was of blue, purple, and crimson yards, and fine twisted linen. It was 20 cubits long. Its height or width was 5 cubits, like that of the hangings of the enclosure. Their posts were 4. Their 4 sockets were of copper, their hooks of silver, and the overlay of their tops was of silver, as were also their bands. All the pegs of the tabernacle and all the enclosure round about were of copper. So again, these are the pegs that held it to the ground. And again, you can make sense because copper was pretty solid, also less expensive, and it was going in the ground. So now we come to the second part, which is the much shorter part, Pekudei, which again is sometimes read as a separate portion, but usually not. And it begins with the words Ele Pekudei. These are the records. So Pekudei means the records, the accounting. This is the way we were recounted or took an inventory of the tabernacle. The tabernacle of the pact, which were drawn up at Moses' bidding, the work of the Levites under the direction of Itamar, the son of the priest. So again, now we're going to get the actual accounting of this. Now people wondered, well, we just had the description of how they built it all. Now why do we have the accounting of it? It's a very interesting lesson. And again, it can be summed up in one really important idea, which is that they wanted to actually have an accurate accounting to make sure that everything was spent properly. Because when they did something like this, they wanted to make sure that everybody would have confidence that nobody took a little bit off the side, that there was no graft or what oftentimes happens with corruption, where people with I said corruption, but with construction, which is also corruption, which is people say, well, where did that money go? Where did all that money go? And again, we're not going to get political, but man, you look at our train to nowhere right now, you're talking about people spending billions of dollars on something that we don't even know if it'll ever really be built, which is, again, where does the money go? Where does the money go when we construct things as a nation, as a state, as a community? It seems like the more levels of government that are involved, we just lose, the money gets lost. They don't want that to happen. And so again, Moses is the first level of accounting here, because again, he got the directions from God, but there are other people are there too, the Levites, and again, specifically the Kohanim, Itamar, the son of Aaron, the priest. He was kind of in charge of it for Aaron on the priestly side. And then of course we have Bezalel. Now Bezalel, son of Uri, son of Hur, of the tribe of Judah, had made all that the Lord had commanded Moses. And at his side was Aholiab, son of Achisamach, of the tribe of Dan, carver and designer and embroiderer in blue, purple, and crimson yarn and in fine linen. All the gold. And here we go. So you heard what we made. Now you're going to hear how much it actually cost. What actually was the weight of this stuff. All the gold that was used for the work and all the sanctuary, the elevation offering of gold, came to 29 talents. And again, to give you an idea of how much a talent is again, we think of the word talent is, we usually use the word for when we hear the word talent, we think of somebody's skill, right? Talent is also a measurement. And again, it was roughly equal. Some people say about 50 kilograms. Some people say it was 20 to 40 kilograms. It is, I would say somewhere, if you want to think about it this way, somewhere between 40 and 100 pounds. That's a big difference. But again, in the Bible, it's probably about 30, I would say probably about 35 pounds, 35 kilograms, which is about 70 pounds. So this is a lot of weight. And again, it specifically says 730 shekels, which is another weight. Of course, the word shekel we think of as a monetary weight amount. The reality, of course, is originally it was a weight, just like we say pounds in Britain. That's because it was worth a pound sterling, right? Whatever the value of a pound of sterling silver was, that was what the value of a pound was at one point. So this is quite a lot of gold, obviously, but it makes sense. It's not a ridiculous amount of gold. It's not an unbelievable amount of gold. It's a doable amount of gold. And so this is what it says was in it. And again, people who've looked at it said, yeah, it's possible that that's how much it was. The silver of those community who recorded it came to 100 talents, 1775 in shekel in sanctuary weight. Now, again, you're going to say, well, wow, that sounds like so much more than the gold. Well, remember, almost every place that they use gold, it was gold overlay, right? It's gold. It's gold. It's gold plating, if you will, right? It's gold on the outside. Most of the silver was solid silver. When they talk about all those rings and all those things that they use for the poles, that's solid silver. So most of the gold, again, is a plate of gold. It's not solid gold, with the exception, of course, of the menorah, which was very heavy, as we heard. A half shekel a head, half a shekel by sanctuary weight for each one of those who was entered into the records from the age of 20 years up was 703,550 men. So this is how, again, we have the 600,000 people who were men at the time of the desert, or leaving the desert. The 100 talents of silver were for casting the sockets of the sanctuary and the sockets of the curtain, 100 sockets to the 100 talents, a talent a socket. And of the 1,775 shekels he made for the hooks of the posts, overlay for the tops, and for the bands around them. The copper from the elevation offering came to 70 talents. So not as much as the silver, but more than the gold. Of it, he made the sockets for the tents, entrance to the tent of meeting, the copper altar and its copper grating, and all the utensils of the altar. The sockets of the enclosure around the gate, the sockets of the gate of the enclosure, and all the pegs of the tabernacle, and all the pegs of the enclosure round about. Now, it's interesting, of course, it doesn't say for the laver, which we heard wasn't from copper that people turned in. It was from the copper of the women's mirrors. So that's why it's not listed there as part of that collected silver, copper, if you will. So there you have the weight of the metals, the precious metals that they gathered, which again is important because people are saying, well, where did this metal go? How much did you use? Here we have it. We just have the accounting of it. And some people would say that's a really important thing, that the people needed to know how the money was spent. And one would make the argument that whenever you raise money for religious reasons, there has to be an accounting of where the money goes. And that's why Harvey right here is on the line right now. Harvey is our treasurer of our temple. And we're lucky that we have a person who's trained in accountancy that could look at our numbers and make sure that we're spending money ethically and appropriately and with good direction, and most importantly, with good accounting. And again, that's not always the case. Not every synagogue does things like that, and not every church does things does that correctly. And I can tell you that in the 20 years that I've been involved with the temple, 21 years this year, I've never seen anything done inappropriately. I've never seen money disappear. I haven't seen money not be spent what it said it was going to be spent. And we've done a really good job of taking people's money that they've offered to us and spend it appropriately. And so, Harvey, congratulations again for doing a great job as our treasurer. It's not often that, again, you get the credit for putting in a lot of volunteer hours, Harvey. And I will tell you that, and again, I'm not giving away any secrets. Anybody can come to a board meeting and see how money's being spent. But as of last night's board meeting, Harvey told us that we are actually going to finish in the positive this year. Projected our June numbers, we close out the year, that we're projected to be in the positive, which is a really good thing, especially now when so many people are having problems economically. We know it's very, very tough right now. That he's been a great steward, and everybody's been very generous during this time too. So we appreciate that. And again, it is important. It is in the Torah. You got to keep accurate records of how money is being spent, especially when people are offering it for religious reasons. I mean, again, you can make the argument if they're offering it for for taxes, for government. Anytime people's money is being spent without their control, they're trusting you, and it should be done in a way that they feel good about it. And we don't always feel that way.
And the Torah sets the standards, and the standards are high.
Yeah.
That's good.
And I think that we all need to think about that. And we need to think about that with the way our taxes are spent, with the way our money is spent at home, with the way our money is spent in a synagogue as well. But especially when the money leaves our control. I mean, at the end of the day, we're responsible for the way we spend our money, right? But if we're giving a tax or if we're giving a donation and we're trusting other people to spend our money, then we better have trust in them. And the Torah says, you part of that is to give an accurate accounting. You don't just tell people, trust us. No, you actually give them an accounting. You actually tell them this is how we spent the money. So I think that's a very important thing to remember, that it's not that people don't trust you, or not that people shouldn't trust you. You should be able to give accurate books. You ought to be able to open up your books and say, this is how we've collected our money. This is how we spent the money. So that is a very high standard in Judaism, and it's something we've taken very seriously. Of the blue, purple, and crimson yarns, they've also made the service vestments for officiating in the sanctuary. They made Aaron's sacral vestments as the Lord had commanded Moses. The ephod was made of gold, blue, and purple, and crimson yarns, and fine twisted linens. They hammered out sheets of gold and cut threads to be worked into designs among the blue and the purple and the crimson yarns and the fine linen. They made it for attaching shoulder pieces. They were attached at two ends. And again, we looked at the ephod before. This kind of thing that went on the front of the priests, in addition to the breastpiece. They made it for attaching shoulder pieces that were attached at its two ends. The decorated band that was upon it was made like it, of one piece of gold, blue, purple, and crimson yarns, and fine twisted linen, as the Lord had commanded Moses. They boarded the lazuli stones and frames of gold, engraved with seal engravings of the names of the sons of Israel. They set on the shoulder pieces of the ephod as stones of remembrance for the Israelites, as the Lord had commanded Moses. The breastpiece was made in the style of the ephod, of gold, blue, purple, and crimson yarns, and fine twisted linen. It was square. They made the breastpiece doubled, a span in length and a span in width, doubled, so about a foot. They set in it 4 rows of stones. And again, we read about this in Truma, the way that the stones were laid out. The first row was, and again, it's exactly the way it says, the row of carnelian, chrysolite, and emerald. Second row, turquoise, sapphire, and amethyst. A third row, a jacinth, an agate, and a crystal. And the fourth row, a beryl, a lapis lazuli, and a jasper. And they were encircled in their mountains with frames of gold. The stones corresponded in number to the names of the sons of Israel, 12 corresponding to their names, engraved like seals, each with its name for the 12 tribes. So it says the stones actually had the names on them. It says that they were on the stone. On the breastpiece, they made braided chains of corded work with pure gold. They made 2 frames of gold and 2 rings of gold and fastened the 2 rings at the ends of the breastpiece, attaching the 2 golden cords to the 2 rings at the end of the breastpiece. And then they fastened the 2 ends of the cords to the 2 frames, attaching them to the shoulder pieces of the ephod at the front. They made 2 rings of gold and attached them to the 2 ends of the breastpiece at its inner edge, with which faced the ephod. They made 2 other rings of gold and fastened them on the front of the ephod, low on the 2 shoulder pieces, close to its seam above the decorated band. And again, we'll show the ephod and the breastpiece one more time so people can see it. And the some of the designs of the ephod. And again, I'm not wild about that picture. I'm going to show you this one that I liked a little bit better. This one is.
Were any of these things found archaeologically?
No.
Any of the stones or the precious?
No. And so the question of, like, what happened to them, whether they could be recreated, it's a weird thing to think about. It's a weird thing to think about whether or not, people in the second temple, how they recreated these things, because again, they didn't have them according to what we know. They
Right.
didn't have them in the second temple. So if we look at, let me show this picture. So, so this one kind of gives you an idea that the stones had the names on them. And again, the ephod, in this picture, the ephod are these pieces right here that have also the names of the tribes on them, 6 on one and 6 on the other. And then you can kind of see the clasps that hold the ephod, the ephod down. And again, if we look at the way it describes it, that it has blue, purple, and red fabric, it's woven with those fabric. So that actually is following the literal description of it. Again, we don't know whether they were woven like this or whether they were bigger pieces, that the colors were the strips were bigger than that. So it's hard to know for sure. But again, this ephod was part of the breastpiece. And if you think about it, the description of it was that it was something in itself that was of value, because we hear about the ephod, the description of the ephod, the construction of it, that while the breastpiece must have been the more dramatic of the two, it definitely was made out of precious stones and precious metal, and that it was pretty important. So they made they made 2 rings of gold and attached them to the 2 ends of the breastpiece and its inner edge, which faced the ephod. They made the 2 other rings of gold and fastened them on the front of the ephod, low on the shoulder pieces, close to its seam and the decorated band, which is again why you see it with that the ephod was above it and kind of it's hanging there. The breastpiece was held in place by a cord of blue from its rings to the rings of the ephod. So the breastpiece rested on the decorated band and did not come loose from the ephod, as the Lord had commanded Moses. The robe for the ephod was made of woven work of pure blue, which is why you saw that blue garment underneath. The opening of the robe and in the middle of it was like an opening of the coat of mail, with a binding around the opening so that it would not tear. On the hem of the robe, they made pomegranates of blue, purple, and crimson yarns twisted. So those are the pomegranates. In addition, they also made bells of pure gold and attached the bells between the pomegranates all around the hem of the robe and the pomegranates. So again, to show you what that bottom image looked like. the bottom of the garment had bells, and it had the pomegranates on it. So this is a literal depiction of what that ephod and what the undergarment of the ephod essentially look like. So it helps you visualize what this beautiful piece looked like. Yep. They also made bells of pure gold again in between, and a bell of pomegranate, and a bell and a pomegranate, a bell and a pomegranate all around the hem of the robe for officiating as the Lord had commanded Moses. They made the tunics underneath of fine linen of woven work for Aaron and his sons, and the headdress of fine linen, and the decorated turbans of fine linen. So again, the turban was different than the headdress. And again, underneath were linen breeches. So they had underwear on underneath their garment, so that they had something underneath this beautiful garment. And sashes of fine twisted linen, blue, purple, and crimson yarns done in embroidery as the Lord had commanded Moses. They made the frontlet of the holy diadem of pure gold. So again, only the high priest had this. And incised upon it the seal inscription, Kadosh Ladonai, holy to the Lord. So that's what the crown of the priest said, holy to the Lord. They attached to it a cord of blue to fix it upon the headdress above, as the Lord had commanded Moses. Thus was completed all the work of the tabernacle of the tent of meeting. The Israelites did so just as the Lord had commanded Moses. So they did. And so again, very important that they said they completed the work. Okay, so they didn't leave it over. They didn't say, we'll finish some of it in a year or two. They finished it, and then they were ready to go. So they didn't say, well, we'll work with what we've got so far. They completed it, and they completed it exactly the way Moses said, which is the way God said. Then they brought the tabernacle to Moses with all the tent and all its furnishings, its clasps, its planks, its bars, its posts, and its sockets, the covering of tan ram skins, the covering of dolphin skins, and the curtain for the screen, the ark of the pact and its poles and the cover, the table and all its utensils and the bread of display, the pure lampstand, its lamps in due order, and all of its fittings, and the oil for lighting, the altar of gold, the oil for anointing, the aromatic incense, and the screen for the entrance of the tent, the copper altar and its copper grating, its poles and all its utensils, and the laver and its stand, the hangings of the enclosure, its posts and its sockets, the screen for the gate of the enclosure, its cords and its pegs, and all the furnishings for the service of the tabernacle of the tent of meeting. The service vestments for officiating in the sanctuary, the sacral vestments of Aaron the priest, and the vestments of his sons for priestly service, just as the Lord had commanded Moses. So the Israelites had done all the work. And when Moses saw that they performed all the tasks as the Lord had commanded, so they had done, Moses blessed them. So again, they did all the work, and he brought it before Moses, and Moses blesses them. And this must have been a very special moment for Moses, again, especially after just having the golden calf incident and having a very low point, that now there's a very, very high point. There's a very special moment here, which is that the people have done what God has asked them to do, and they've created this beautiful, beautiful sanctuary for God, and most importantly, for themselves to come to God. And so what does Moses do? He blesses them, because again, they've created this space, and they have created a place of holiness. And so what else can Moses do? He can thank them. He can say, you did the right thing, but he actually does something even better. He blesses them. So this is the last chapter for tonight. This is the end of the
Beautiful.
portion. It's really beautiful. You could have ended it there. And again, next week, we're going to read Leviticus. We're going to read what they did in this place, in this holy tabernacle, in this these sacrifices that were offered here now that they had built this place. And again, it makes a lot of sense to kind of go there. That's why, we go there in the book of Leviticus, as we kind of step outside of the story and then have very little narrative in Leviticus, but we have what the people did in this sacred space, and who, as we read in Leviticus. So here's the last.
And it's another really good lesson too, that even if you've done wrong, you can be forgiven and blessed.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And the people now have a good feeling of doing the right thing, of building the right thing. Again, after building the golden calf, the juxtaposition of those two things, the golden calf and the tabernacle, is not an accident, right? It's not. This is kind of, again, this moment for the people to redeem themselves, as you said, Joyce, that even though they had done something so bad, that now they've been able to do something good, and they've been able to redeem themselves, and they really do have an ability now to find a way back to God. You know, that they're going to be able to do. There's hope, and there's a way to connect to God. So this last chapter is kind of, if you think about it, it's the end of Exodus, and so to some extent it wraps up with the tabernacle, with the construction, but it's also wrapping up Exodus. And again, to get back to that wonderful article that the Schulmans shared, the one from the Wall Street Journal, the Leon Cass piece. What was so great about, again, looking at the book of Exodus from the beginning to the end, as we've done over those last weeks, and to reflect on it, is that it starts off again with the story of how we were slaves and how we were redeemed, and freedom, and the lessons from that. Then we move into the law at Mount Sinai and Mishpatim, in getting the law, and again, to some extent, also getting the law of how to create the sacred space. But then it goes into the sacred space, the construction of the sacred space, and this digression and transgression into the golden calf. And so it's really about, now, how do we connect with God? So we have freedom, we have law, and now finally we have a way to express that with our connection to God. And so this is what makes the story kind of, if we look at those three sections: redemption, revelation, and now connection. This is kind of now looking at what that means. And so this is not just wrapping up the Torah portion, not even wrapping up this last section of the last, if you will, 15 chapters or so of Exodus. It's actually wrapping up the book of Exodus. So let's take a look. And we'll finish with this in perfect timing. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, on the first day of the first month, you shall set up the tabernacle of the tent of meeting. Place the ark of the pact and screen off the ark with the curtain. Bring in the table and lay out in its due setting. Bring in the lampstand and light its lamps. And place the gold altar of incense before the ark of the pact. Then put up the screen for the entrance of the tabernacle. So this is the way God says now to set these things up. So again, they haven't set it up yet. Now God's saying, this is how you set it up. You shall place the altar of burnt offering before the entrance of the tabernacle of the tent of meeting. Place the laver between the tent of meeting and the altar, and put water in it. Well, that makes sense. Don't want to set it up and then have the water, put the water in it after you set it up. Set up the enclosure round about, and put in place the screen for the gate of the enclosure. You shall take the anointing oil and anoint the tabernacle and all that is in it, to consecrate it, all its furnishings, so that it should be holy. So you take, once it's all set up, then you take oil and you anoint it. You consecrate it. So the oil is kind of the finishing touch to it, to make it holy. And we've read this already. This was kind of like in the description in the beginning, Truma. This is what you're going to do. Then anoint the altar of burnt offering and all its utensils, to consecrate the altar, so that the altar shall be most holy. And anoint the laver and its stand, to consecrate it. You shall bring Aaron and his sons forward to the tent, to the entrance of the tent of meeting, and wash them with the water. Put the sacral vestments on Aaron and anoint him and consecrate him that he may serve me as priest. Then bring his sons forward and put tunics on them and anoint them as you've anointed their father, that he may serve me as priests. This is their anointing. Their anointing shall serve them for everlasting priesthood throughout the ages. So again, this is what you're supposed to do. The last step is to make the priests ready to serve. So after you've made everything ready, then you make the priests ready. And it says Moses did this. Just as the Lord had commanded him, so he did. And in the first month of the second year, on the first of the month, the tabernacle was set up. Moses set up the tabernacle, placing its sockets, setting up its planks, inserting its bars, and erecting its posts. He spread the tent over the tabernacle, placing the covering of the tent on top of it, just as the Lord had commanded Moses. Now, I will tell you that it says that Moses did this. It's what it says.
I know.
Moses set up the tabernacle. So it says that he did it himself. Didn't say he had somebody else did it. It said he did it. It's very interesting that Moses wanted to do it himself. I don't know if he didn't trust anybody else or he felt he wanted to do it. He felt he was honored to do it. But the idea of Moses doing this himself is kind of interesting, especially since everybody else had worked on it, but he's going to put it together. He's assembling it. It doesn't say that Moses, it doesn't say.
Well, he couldn't have done it himself.
I don't know. I'm only telling you
What it is.
what it says, right? And when you look at it, it doesn't say you have to do the work yourself. It says he placed the covering of the tent. I mean, he went on the top. He climbed as an 80-year-old man. He's climbing to the top, just as the Lord had commanded Moses. He took the pack and he placed it in the ark. He fixed the poles of the ark, placed the cover on the top of the ark, and brought the ark inside the tabernacle. Which, by the way, again, there's poles. I mean, there's two poles. You think 4 people would have to place it themselves. Right. Then he put the curtain for the screen and screened off the ark of the pact, just as the Lord had commanded Moses. He placed the table in the tent of meeting outside the curtain on the north side of the tabernacle. Upon it, he laid out the setting of bread before the Lord. This is the bread of showbread, as the Lord had commanded Moses. He placed the lampstand, the menorah, in the tent of meeting opposite the table and on the south side of the tabernacle. And he lit the lamps before the Lord as the Lord had commanded Moses. Now, what's interesting about this, of course, is that he also does this final act of lighting the menorah. So if you asked who lit the menorah for the first time, it's Moses. He got to light it. So Aaron gets to do all, and his family, they get to do all the work inside, but he got to do the setup. He set it up. Now, assumedly, again, this is what he wanted to do. He placed the altar of gold in the tent of meeting before the curtain. So on it, he burned aromatic incense as the Lord had commanded. So that's the altar, the incense altar. Then he put up the screen for this entrance of the tabernacle. At the entrance of the tabernacle, the tent of meeting, he placed the altar of the burnt offering. Right, this is the copper one. On it, he offered a burnt offering and the meal offering as the Lord had commanded Moses. So according to this, he burnt something on it before Aaron did. It says on it, he offered up the burnt offering and the meal offering as the Lord had commanded Moses. He placed the laver between the tent of meeting and the altar and put water in it for washing. From it, Moses and Aaron and his sons would wash their hands and feet. Again, it doesn't just say they wash their hands, but they would also wash their feet. They washed when they entered the tent of meeting and when they approached the altar as the Lord commanded Moses. And by the way, from this, we get the interesting rule that we're supposed to wash our hands. I guess you could say and feet too, but definitely we have to wash our hands every morning when we wake up. That's considered part of our traditional Jewish rituals of washing our hands and saying the blessing, Al Natilat Yadayim. As we wash our hands, and again, the tradition was to reenact this ritual that Aaron and the Kohanim would do when they were priests. That we are supposed to do it too. So it's not just we're washing our hands for cleanliness, we're also washing our hands for holiness too. And so this was an interesting idea that when we started our day, when we said our prayers in the morning, these were part of our ritual, our daily ritual. Every day we're supposed to wash our hands, and again, feet too, and because they did it when they approached the altar, so they would do it every day. And he set up enclosure around the tabernacle and the altar and put up the screen for the gate of the enclosure. When Moses had finished the work, the cloud covered the tent of meeting, and the presence of the Lord filled the tabernacle. What that means, and again, arguably the most important line in the whole section here, is that when Moses was done setting it all up, that the presence of God, the Anan, the cloud, was there, and God's presence, the Kavod Adonai, this intense presence of God, filled the tabernacle. Now, the description of this, again, is like a cloud. It's like something that fills up, like smoke that filled up this area, this Mishkan. And I mean, this is like God's presence is now in this place. Build it. Which then begs the question, well, how can Moses go in there? Well, he couldn't. Moses could not enter the tent of meeting because the cloud had settled upon it, and the presence of the Lord filled the tabernacle. So he couldn't go in. Couldn't go. There's no place for him. It was filled with God. But here's what it says. When the cloud lifted from the tabernacle, the Israelites would set out on their various journeys. But if the cloud did not lift, they would not set out until such time as it did lift. For over the tabernacle, a cloud of the Lord rested by day, and fire would appear in it by night, in view of all the house of Israel throughout their journeys. And that's the last line in the book of Exodus. And what's so interesting about it is, of course, here in this place where they created a holy place for God, that's where God is. And when God is there in that room, in that space, they didn't move. When God left that space, when the cloud came out, then they would go. That would be how do they know when to move? When they saw God's presence out of that building and out in front. That's how they knew. The cloud would be there to lead them. So this is a really interesting idea, which kind of brings everything together, which is that what happens now for the people is that they're led by God. They have God with them. God is continuing their journey, and is helping them on their way towards the promised land. But God is also now in this place, and they feel that, again, God's presence is going to be with them. And again, this idea that they had a place where God was at, where they knew that God was somewhat, attached to, made them feel, again, that you could make the argument that they knew that they were in the presence of holiness. Doesn't make them perfect. It doesn't stop them, obviously, from making mistakes. But what's really interesting, again, is that this is the way the book of Exodus ends. It ends with this sense that their journey is connected to this holy space, that the holy space and the presence of God is what's going to lead them. And they're not by themselves, obviously. They have God with them, and that God's redemption is going to be with them for the rest of their journey. And so what it does is it begins, we began with the Exodus, and we kind of end with the fact that journey is still out there for them, that when it says that they would set out, that was their call to movement, was their journey. Yisu, that this would when they be journeying, and it was with them on Bechol Masahim. It was with them on all their journeys. That the journey is still going on. The journey is not done, but they have God and they have God's presence with them. They have a connection to God now wherever they go. And so again, the beginning of the book comes back here at the end, which is that the journey is still out there in front of them. They have God's presence. They now have a connection with them. And again, I refer back to that great article that we read, because it really reminds us of the message of Exodus, that again, this book, which is about, in a sense, the journey of our people, and also on a personal level, what does it mean to be on a journey of life? This is the hope, is that we have all, and this was Cass's point, that we have all three of these in our own lives, that we have freedom, we have revelation, and law, and also a place of connecting to God. So it's not just for our ancestors, it's not just for the book of Exodus, but then on a personal level. And that's why I love that article so much, that it really is speaking to us as individuals, that each of us, goes through this on our own lives, on our own journeys. So again, if you haven't read it, or if you did read it, go back and read it now that we finished it, now that we've wrapped up Exodus, and see what you think. So again, as we finish a book of the Bible, and as we come to the end of this book of the Torah, we say chazak, chazak, v'nit chazak. Be strong, be strong. Let all of us be strengthened. And again, on our journeys through life, and hopefully journeys that are going to be a little bit freer than they were last month, with less fear. Many of us have now been vaccinated and can feel like we can go out and participate in more things, that we definitely hope we feel the presence of God on that journey. And again, I want to thank everybody for being here on the journey through Exodus. So we also say Tam v'neshalem tehillah el borei olam, that we give thanks to God, the creator of everything, of all of creation. And again, to pause and reflect on where we are here on March 10th, as we were last year, just at the beginning of this journey through COVID, that again, it's a good place to end right now, hopefully setting aside that journey. But of course, it's so interesting, as we like to point out, that in the Hebrew, the word kavod means the presence. It is the divine presence, is the honor of God. Kavod is much more should be on our minds than COVID. So they sound the same. They sound the same. And you've heard that word. We use it in Hebrew and in Yiddish too, right? COVID. People didn't give me enough COVID. They usually use it in a negative way. People didn't give me enough honor, right? COVID. That's a Yiddish word too. Kavod it was used in Yiddish, was honor and respect. So people didn't give me enough kavod. It's usually in the negative. People didn't give me enough kavod. But again, it should be a good thing. It should be honor. Anyways, everybody, take care, be safe, and be healthy, and be happy. And we'll see everybody soon. We'll see you next week. We do have class on Wednesday. We don't have class, by the way, I forgot to announce it. We don't have class next Tuesday. I'll be on a journey actually on Tuesday morning, but Wednesday we do have a class, and I hope to see everybody next Wednesday as we begin Leviticus, Vayikra. So everybody, take care.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you, Rabbi.
Be
Thank
happy,
you
everybody.
so much.
Take care.
Bless
Love you,
you.
Joyce.
Love you, Joy.
Thank you. Love you back.
Love you, Joyce.